I recently saw a video by Vox on the Israel-Palestine conflict, and in it, they're lying to you. The video looks good, but the issue is, it's also wrong. They skip out important events, screw up the timeline, and rewrite history. It's painful to watch. Vox is a huge media outlet with over 12 million subscribers on YouTube, and their videos often have millions of views, but they still take a wildly one-sided view on history. Let me explain. Vox sets the stage for their video, the mass displacement of Palestinian Arabs during Israel's independence.
That history has been carefully concealed, purposefully distorted, and in the West, largely forgotten.
That's just not true. The whole conflict today is based on the refugee crisis from the displacement of all those Palestinians. It's that all the Palestinians who ran away or were expelled have no way of getting back to their homes and are waiting to be able to do so. Hasn't been forgotten or carefully concealed, as Vox says. It's literally the centre of the issue and is one of the biggest obstacles to Israel having long-term peace with neighbouring Arab countries. Vox then shows a map of Palestine at the beginning of World War I.
By the time World War I began,
this map is wrong. Palestine was actually much bigger than that during World War I. In fact, over double the size. And only a few years after the war did the British break up Palestine into two. One side was made into an Arab land, which is today known as Jordan, and the other side was dedicated to become the Jewish homeland, and includes what we know today as both Israel and the Palestinian territories. Vox goes on to explain that the British, who were in charge of Palestine at the time, promised to make the country into a Jewish homeland.
Without consulting the native Palestinian population, the British issued what's known as the Balfour Declaration, supporting the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people.
Vox makes it clear that this promise was given without consulting the native Palestinian population, making as if that's really bad. But if it is so bad, why didn't Vox also mention that when the British gave a separate, conflicting promise to Arabs, that Palestine will become part of one big Arab state, that was also given without consultation of the native Palestinian population? Both conflicting promises to the Jews and to the Arabs that they will each receive Palestine, both were done without the consultation of the native population. And by the way, if the population had been asked, they would have likely said no to both. So essentially, when Vox say that the Jews will promise Palestine without the permission of the local people, yes, that is totally correct. But they conveniently miss out that the promise given to the Arabs was also done in the exact same circumstances. Vox then goes on to say that the Jews bought land in Palestine after World War I, but listen to how they frame it.
Jewish settlers purchased swaths of fertile land and evicted tenant farmers, creating a crisis of hundreds of thousands of landless, dispossessed Palestinian Arabs.
That description sounds like the Zionists did something really wrong, when in reality, Jews legally bought land and then evicted the current tenants to make way for their friends, family, and other Jewish immigrants. There's nothing wrong with that, legally or morally. Why are they trying to make it sound like there is? Vox then continues.
Though Palestinians fiercely rebelled against both British colonial forces and Jewish settlers, they were brutally crushed by the British.
This is missing out some key points. Yes, the Palestinians protested against the Zionist movement, but the protest turned into violence, and the violence turned into murder. And the British, who were looking after Palestine at that time, tried to stop the violence by offering them 75% of Palestine and Jews to only get around 20%. You've got to keep in mind that at this time, the official plan was for all of Palestine to become one Jewish homeland. So for the Palestinians to get offered 75% of the land instead of the current plan, which was 0, that seems to be a pretty good deal. But still, the Palestinians rejected it and instead became even more violent, murdering even more people. To just say, as Vox did, that the Palestinians rebelled.
Palestinians fiercely rebelled
And were then brutally crushed.
They were brutally crushed.
Is missing a whole lot of very important context. Vox then continues to explain Britain's response to the violence.
In an attempt to prevent further Palestinian resistance, the British began to limit Jewish immigration into Palestine.
Once again, it's important to mention the context. After the Palestinians continued the violence, the British faced a dilemma. World War II was on the horizon and they desperately wanted Arab support during the war. So they had to come up with a solution that would not only end the violence, but would also ensure that the Arabs would support Britain during World War II. So what did they do? The British decided to abandon their current plan to create a Jewish state, and instead they said they'll make all of Palestine into one single Arab state, and immediately started to limit Jewish immigration to Palestine. This is amazing for the Palestinians. They got exactly what they wanted. At this point, they were still on course to receive 0% of Palestine, to get no land, so to suddenly get all 100% of it, that is pretty good. But instead, the Palestinian leadership for some reason actually rejected the plan. So when Vox mentioned that Palestinian resistance and Britain limiting Jewish immigration, I think it's really important to mention the context, which is that the Palestinians got offered all of the land, everything they asked for, and they still said no. Vox then moves on to after World War II, to when the UN gave their solution to end the conflict, which was to split Palestine into two.
In November 1947, the UN put the plan to a vote. In the aftermath of the Holocaust, and after lobbying from US leaders and Zionists, the UN voted in favor of partition.
And finally, a momentous decision to partition the Holy Land's 10,000 square miles.
Britain announced their mandate over Palestine would end on May 15, 1948, even as Palestinians continued to reject the UN's decision to partition the land.
Vox say that the Palestinians rejected the UN's plan, but for some reason what they don't say is that the day after the UN's plan was passed, the Palestinians didn't just reject it, they launched a full-scale civil war, attacking and murdering innocent Jews. Vox then goes on to talk about the Zionist paramilitary force, which was known as the Haganah, and how they planned to defend Israel, their future state.
The Haganah adopted what was called Plan Dalet, or Plan D. On paper, the main goal was to gain control of the Jewish state, as laid out in the partition plan, while also defending Jewish settlements outside of the borders. In reality, that's where the majority of these operations took place, outside of the UN's proposed Jewish state.
As I mentioned, whilst the Zionists accepted the UN's plan, the Palestinians not only rejected it, but launched a war to try to make sure that the Jewish state of Israel never came to exist at all. And by the way, if the Arabs had won the war, they would have likely mass expelled Jews from Palestine. Okay, so the Zionists took a bit more land than they were supposed to, but let's just remember the context and which side accepted a peace plan and which side refused a peace plan and instead launched a war of extermination. Vox then explains that after the Zionists won the civil war, they announced independence and named their newfound country as a state of Israel. But then the Arab countries immediately attacked them.
Neighboring Arab countries that were overwhelmed by Palestinian refugees immediately went to war with Israel.
No, that's just wrong. The reason the neighbouring Arab states attacked Israel is not because of refugees, but because they wanted Israel's annihilation. It's that simple. Even 20 years after this, the Arab states famously declared in unity that together they would not recognise Israel, not negotiate with Israel, and not make peace deal with Israel. To say the Arab states invaded Israel because of refugees is completely wrong. They wanted Israel's annihilation and wanted their land for themselves. To end off this video, I just want to say how surprised I was to see the one-sided view Vox is taking on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Quite often, they ignore certain facts just to make their points, and that is just wrong.